Hey, Kayla. Hey, Mary. Hey, Muriel.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Maybe I need to turn on a light. No, that's worse.
We
How's
don't
everybody?
need to just have controversial topics to get together from time to time.
That's true. Although it is kind of nice to have to see everyone.
Yeah.
I like your background, Dan.
Thanks. I'm trying to put a happy face on everything these days.
Yeah, I like it. I like the double rainbow.
I know, I was hoping we could actually like organically pass each other in the hall. What a strange concept.
I don't know that that's going to happen
I
anytime
know.
soon.
I know.
Things have changed. Things have changed so much this last weekend.
I know.
Hi, Shiloh. Thanks.
Hi, Dan. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
And there's
Hi.
Sean. So people are still coming in. Hey, Sean.
Hi. Well, my camera is on. Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So it's 11:01. I just wanted to let you know that I have turned on the recording, if that's okay, and just to capture comments. If you're uncomfortable with that, I can turn it off as well. And you could even let me know privately in the chat. I don't have to call you out.
It doesn't bother me.
All right. Well, this is really just an informal chat to kind of explore the current situation, which kind of took me by surprise because of the situation with the core. I mean, I already sort of laid this out in my email to you all, but I thought, honestly, that the hybrid situation was kind of a temporary measure, for the fall. And then when I looked more closely at the spring schedule, I realized that, oh no, we're continuing on with this hybrid modality into the spring, and this was really without discussion. I think Stephen is also joining us. I mean, there are some key dates, like I believe it's August 19th that the schedule for the spring goes live, or is fixed, whatever you say. And so if we want to make changes, one of the new people in the office is a guy named Kevin Godfrey, and he sort of alerted me to the fact that if we needed to make changes, we needed to make them right away. So in any case, hence a little bit of sense of urgency about having this discussion and having maybe a unified voice from faculty, because I feel like I don't really have a lot of power in this discussion, although the number of classes that I'm supervising in the core now has just ballooned. We have 44 classes that I'm supervising in the fall, and pretty much everything except 3D is a hybrid class, meaning it meets once a week, and the balance of the material is to be accessed asynchronously through video. Not a separate Zoom session, but actually asynchronous pre-recorded stuff. And so that's a major push for us to really prepare all those materials for the hybrid modality as well. I don't know, somebody's talking on the phone, but anyway.
Can you mute them, Dan?
Well, yeah, I could. Okay. So let me see. I'm not sure who that was who's talking on the phone right now, but in any case, I could mute everybody, but I don't want to do that. Anyway, I really just love some feedback. And for those who just got online, I am recording the session just so it's easy to kind of pull out statements and whatnot. And I see a potential role for me is just compiling you know, no pro or con, but just compiling a kind of faculty kind of opinion list that would be shared with admin. And I think tangential to this issue, this specific issue on hybrid modality, is also the idea of, well, hey, who are we, chop liver? You know, I mean, we should have input into something that impacts our curriculum in such significant ways. And in fact, I think many people who have already sent their comments in, like Adrian and Mark Klett in particular, both were very adamant about this idea of we all need faculty input when there's a major curricular change like this. So, yeah, Mary.
Dan, I think that there's 3 separate issues that we should discuss, and so that the issues stay kind of clearly delineated. And
Okay.
the first one, of course, is the curricular change, right? This is a major curriculum change, and it impacts the students, the way that they interact with each other, the way they interact with faculty, and the way they create community. And then the second thing is the space limitations. And I feel like that's a separate issue from the curricular issues.
Yes.
And then the third issue, which is a really big issue, of course, is the lack of faculty input. And so I think when it's presented, I would recommend breaking it down into those 3 categories and making sure that they're all presented as autonomous issues, not all they're all interlinked in this situation, but they're still like all
Absolutely.
autonomous issues.
No, really good point. And I think that's very clear the way you articulated that.
Thank you.
I wonder, I mean, I'm thinking about what Adrian, I mean, there was a couple of points that both Adrian and Heidi brought up in their emails. And I wonder, you know, for some faculty and for some student learners, this hybrid model is going to be perfect, right? And so how do we sort of open space for that and hold space for that, and also hold space for those different types of learners who are going to do way better for the kind of ongoing thing. So I don't know if that ends up being that fits in one of Mary's 3 categories, that kind of step out, not, or if it's something separate. And then also the thing that Heidi was talking about, sort of building off of that, because Heidi was talking about how your program, Dan, and what ASU has done is looked at nationally as a model, right? As a model for teaching. And I think, wow, that's obviously tied into the way we climbed in the rankings nationally. And when you build out on that, and do we want to put at risk the learning that the grad students are getting from that experience? So it's both the learners who are the students, but it's also the learners who are the emerging teachers. And again, I don't know if that also fits in Mary's 3 levels of categories, but if not, those would also be other categories, and we may find others.
I think some of the issues are curricular issues. And, you know, it's a good point, because some students really did well. Well, actually, I didn't find any of my students did particularly well in the hybrid model, but I'm sure in other cases, there's been students who have done well. Yeah, I mean, it's a curricular issue, and it could be an offering issue. You know, maybe classes are off, you know, some sections are offered just online. So students who feel that that's what they want, especially in core, where you have multiple sections of a class.
I think there are significant differences at different levels across our program. You know, what we could expect from a senior or graduate student in terms of self-navigating through a set of resources is very different than what we'd expect at a freshman level. And I've been in super close touch with Toby Kidd and Tim McKean over in Haida Online, and Rowan DeFaria. He's just somebody who just immediately preceded me in the the PhD program over in education, working with Marina McIsaac in distance learning. This is a conversation that some of us have been having for literally decades. And the jury is still kind of out in terms of the benefits of hybrid or distance learning. I mean, yeah, we see certain students excel, but if you're looking for hard evidence, the papers that Tim and Toby sent me were kind of mixed in terms of their reporting. I mean, Tim initially said, oh yeah, it shows that hybrid learning is actually slightly better than face-to-face instruction. But when you actually read the paper, you find that it's like 0.02% improvement only when everything that is non-quantitativable, if I can use that word, is eliminated from the mix. So in other words, if you're having a student read a paper and then take a quiz that has a clear number associated with it, okay, that situation actually favors the hybrid programming. But if you're talking about, you know, in-class critiques or, you know, submitting subjective portfolios of work and all of that, it doesn't, there's really no evidence, you know, that the hybrid learning model is better. And so but you will hear this on the street, that, oh, hybrid learning is better than face-to-face instruction. But I haven't seen the evidence, and I'm part of this process. I'd be really interested to find reports or, you know, careful kind of controlled studies that actually talk about this being an improved modality. So I don't think that argument holds water, but I do think it's probably a pragmatic response to space limitations and pressure on enrollment. So I get it. I mean, admin is under a lot of pressure, and so this is one avenue. So if we don't push back, it's going to move in that direction because space and enrollment are really hammering us right now, you know?
So I have a couple thoughts. I think that's a really great way of kind of fragmenting these out and saying like these are three separate issues. But I do think they're deeply entangled. And I do think on one hand we have to sort of ask what's at the root of these. So what is the limitation that is creating this? Is space the primary issue? Is it an increase in enrollment? Like, I think they're all working together, but if we can kind of narrow it down to what created this problem, then we can begin to kind of get to the, like asking faculty for input. I completely agree. Like if my classes were all like, I'm wondering, Dan, if you put them as all in person and then they were changed to hybrid without consulting you.
Yes.
So that, you know, those kind of processes are their own conversation, right? And then like what would come into play with thinking differently about them? So would that mean that a committee of 5 people have to come together to get, like, to replace all the places that classes are being held that your 40 need to be held now? Because then, you know, right, so like the people that are currently in those classrooms need to be displaced as well. So those are different issues. I do wonder, and I agree with you when people present research, if you're someone that does research, you could see the gaps and you're like, well, yeah, but you're not asking for these variables.
Right.
But and I do, and so what I think is important for us to question is what are the outcomes we're looking for? So if we're really thinking about learners moving forward and the kind of economy that we live in and where our creative economy is going is actually really beneficial for these future professionals to know how to self-navigate. And what I mean by that is, like, again, these hybrid classes could be more relevant to the world looking forward. That being said, what we're looking at right now, I feel like, is just completely a lack model. Like, we're just going to take things away and then not like balance them with other opportunities. We're just going to say like only meet half the time and then figure it out online. Whereas like programs I've seen, like James Thurman's, who is modeled after yours, Dan, has spent years transitioning to his medals program and to the 3D core at the University of North Texas being a hybrid model. But it's taken years to do that effectively in a well-designed way. So it's not something you can do in a semester, and it's not something you can do in 2 years even, right? Like all these things are going to need to be moved around, and time and space for us needs to be made available, not just go work with HIDA online, because they're still really working in a very kind of test-based, you know, like these kind of like narrow learning outcomes kind of model. They're really, in my opinion, not looking at so much of the experiential, the community building, all these other elements that come with a college education and with building a network, like a professional network. So like if out of necessity, we just don't have space and we don't have the $10 million, you know, investment right now to begin building another building, which are all questions that need to be started and need to be happening. Where's the balance? So if our goals and our mission as a school and as, you know, an institution are that we're preparing people for a profession, to build professional networks, to have professional experience, where is the balance that could put some of that back in? Like we in School of Art have no community spaces. So let's say it's like you're going to limit the in-person class time, but those TAs could instead be made available for more, you know, open community kind of engagement where there's like a large maker space or a large workshop that students come in and work together in more organic ways or more independently. That could actually be a nice balance to just this
Nice
kind of,
idea.
you know, one directional teacher down that we're all still kind of clinging to, right? But that balance isn't being afforded. There's not space for even that to supplement the loss. And those things I think are kind of questions, instead of saying like, no, we want to have the model we have because it works best. Like, okay, change is going to happen. So what kind of conversations do we start? Not just like implement it all online. Because I also would argue, I mean, my daughter's 10, she learns like, I cannot believe she learns so much faster than me, lots of different technologies online. So we are dealing with a next generation that learns lots from YouTube, a lot faster than us.
Right. Ellen, welcome. Glad you could join us.
Oh, sorry, I'm late.
No worries. Just a couple other little kind of details about the calendar and notification. So I think I first became aware that the fall semester was going to be hybrid for us last April. And by May, we had worked up a plan that I was to submit a number of faculty associates and TAs who could help in the process of developing video-based materials to replace the loss in classroom time. It's a tremendous development effort, right? Okay, but the problem was that those approvals didn't come through until mid-July, even though I put them in late May. And so by that time, all of the TAs and FAs that I had lined up were gone and they weren't going to be available until August. And so then I did meet with Forrest briefly and I said, this is the situation. We need funding basically from mid-August on to do this, and we're going to play catch up as we move along through the units, because the units are somewhat predictable that we pass through in core, and so we'll just stay a week or two ahead. Is that okay? And so, yeah, so they changed the funding. I have 3 people to help me starting mid-August to develop these videos, and we'll work right through the end of the semester on this process. In the meantime, I've been doing a lot of videos this summer to kind of fill in gaps and get people started in the first part of the semester. But it's been sort of like, oh my God, last summer putting everything online and this summer making a bunch of videos. It isn't my idea of a 9-month contract. So, it wasn't until just a couple of weeks ago that I realized that, okay, not only is it this fall, which we're not ready for, but it's next spring. That is also already in the pipeline for being a hybrid situation for the core anyway. I'm not really sure of what you guys are faced with in terms of hybrid classes. Mary, you said you had hybrid classes already in printmaking. But that would be interesting to see across the board how many classes across the whole School of Art are being offered as hybrid as opposed to full 6-hour in-person studio classes.
I had a couple hybrid, especially when we first went into lockdown, and I was kind of forced into doing that but it was really hard. And it was not just hard, like it was a hard transition, it was hard to deliver the content in an impactful way with what I teach, because
Yeah.
what I teach is so hands-on. It's not, you know, I mean, I can, if I was teaching my digital processes class, perhaps, but you know, it was really, really challenging, and students got really frustrated. And then when we went to the semester that we did the one day in person, one day online, that just was terrible. For me, it was terrible because I couldn't be online and be in person at the same time,
It's very hard.
you know, and because we're not static. We don't sit in front of a screen, you know. I'm moving around different studios, different spaces, demoing. It's exceedingly difficult. And for me, I felt like the quality of the work and the amount of work that I could get from the students fell by half.
Mm.
Usually we get 5 projects done. We barely made it through 3.
Oh,
And that was like, you know, me cheerleading them all the way to the finish line, you know, for those 3
Right.
projects.
right.
But there's something else I wanted to bring up. I don't know if everyone saw that School of Art update that Forrest sent out this morning. She sent out a rather long email. It's actually really kind of great. I mean, it's very comprehensive, and there's a lot of information in there, and a lot of resources, which will be really helpful. So I would recommend reading it and bookmarking it. But one of the things that she mentioned was that we have 235 incoming freshmen, and that's a 33% increase. So should our
33%. Wow.
33% increase,
Yeah.
correct? That's what she said in the email this morning. And how, I mean, how ethical is it to keep accepting students when we know we don't have space for them?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that for me, there's an ethical issue there. You know, we want your money, but we don't want you, you know? and that kind of is a problem. And if we're going to increase our enrollment, and the expectation is implied that we also increase our retention, right? Then shouldn't our space allocation be proportionate to those numbers?
One little workaround that I had a conversation with Forrest about, and she's been great. I think she's struggling with a very
Oh, yeah.
difficult transition and trying
Yeah.
to hit the ground running and problem solve as only Forrest can. I mean, this is not
Forrest
criticism
doing.
of Forrest, you know.
Yeah.
She's doing the best she can with a very difficult circumstance. One of the ideas we talked about is the idea of more distinction between the BA and the BFA program, so that the BFA would be more value added, where there was more face time with the instructor, more in-person instruction, whereas the BA would be more online, more remote, and that if somebody wanted to be accepted into the BFA program, they would incentivize it to a certain degree. Maybe there would be a portfolio review, and then coming into a full BFA experience where they have more face time with the instructors. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I don't know if that would totally solve the problem, but it's a partial fix. Yeah, Gregory.
I really wanted to invite Sean and Shyla to maybe jump in here, because I'm wondering in part about different types of learners based on different, Mary was talking about, and maybe Ellen, a certain kind of way, the kind of haptic learner, the learner who has to use really hands-on. And I'm just wondering if for any number of reasons, just inviting both of you to kind of weigh in here. Sean, because of the growth, the number of students coming into your program, the different type of interface with digital material.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak a little bit to what my experience has been for the last year. I think mine is probably different than Shiloh's, different from Turner's, because we're all different kind of chunks of this animation major. Right. And the program has grown a lot. Last fall we had 0 majors, and this fall we have 304. If you look at the chart that Forrest sent out. So there's a lot coming in, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with it on all sides, because we have one computer lab, and the computer lab right now is blocked out from 7:30 a.m. Monday through Thursday until I think 7 or 10 o'clock at night, 4 days a week. And so we tried to hold Friday open, so we have time even for students to just do work in there that's not just during class. And so we're trying to figure out space issues and equipment issues. Learning wise, it is, at least as far as I've been doing it, I've switched all my classes hybrid because enrollment is high and I'm trying to get them through on time. And so I'm taking 30 at a time for the studio and splitting them half and half, 15, 15, 15 on one day, 15 on the other day. And all the content is online. For most of them, it seems to work well because they can stop, pause, play, rewind, and see what they're working on again and again. Or some of the classes are hierarchical, so they might do something in a later class where they have to remember how to do something the semester previous. So they can go and look at the content on the Canvas thing from a semester or two previously, and then remember how to do something technical in the current class that they're in. So that has worked out. Of course, it requires them to go through it. And so if they skip or jump or miss a week, things stack and it can kind of fall apart. The quality, I would also agree, was not as good as I have seen from students in the past in the types of classes that I teach. And I don't know if it is a hybrid thing or if it is a COVID thing or if it is what the situation is, because I kind of had both of those factors hitting at once. So it's sort of multivariable kind of thing. And I think this fall may not be any easier to tell how that's going.
Hey, Sean, I just want to jump in and say that one of the results of all of your classes, being increased in 301, which is in the main School of Art building, main computer lab. Oh, wait a minute, I'm asking a random number to okay. Are you getting an echo from me? In any, all of our IDM, all of our digital media classes have been moved over to the Laddie Core building. And we have 12 of them, up from 3 a couple years ago. We've had a tremendous problem even getting TAs and FAs to fill those classes. And we've had to eliminate the hands-on component of the class, which was a little stop motion that we really loved and students really loved as a kind of a culminating exercise. So now we're in this more, it's a beautiful room, but it's a generic mediated classroom with, Adobe Creative Cloud and nothing else. And also they don't have, some of the sections don't have access to any classroom outside of class. So they need to go to other buildings like the Computer Commons or so on, other computer labs that have the Adobe Creative Suite. Okay, anyway, I just wanted to make that.
Maybe
Yeah, I
if
don't know.
everyone who's not speaking right now could just mute.
Yeah, I'll mute everybody here. Sorry.
I don't know if Shiloh or Turner, you had a different experience with hybrid. I don't remember how you both had classes going this fall. I know part of it was in person, part of it was hybrid for both of you.
Yeah, my classes went pretty well in terms of the hybrid for the same reasons that yours did, Sean, because they have the recordings that they can go back to, and they heavily relied on those recordings. Like I would get a lot of emails like, did you post the recording yet? If like Zoom hadn't posted it within like an hour, the students were getting on me about, like getting the tutorials up. So I think things like that were really successful when they had references that they could go to. But the thing that I found, which was challenging, is that whether my assignments were too close together, they were in need of extra time. And so like they needed more time. I would find that I would give them extra work days that I hadn't necessarily planned for in my syllabus or in the schedule for them to be able to complete the work. And so I don't know if that was a matter of it being too difficult, too time consuming, or if there was a problem with the interfacing on Zoom with them not being in class. But one of the things I did notice was I had hybrids starting to come in at the beginning of the semester where people would come in one day and then, like not be there for the second day. But that quickly went away. Then they were just wanting to be at home working on their work. It was easier to just stay home and be online and on Zoom rather than to come all the way into campus and sit in the room. But the times that we did sit in the room were so much more valuable, I think, because we were in person, we were having some amazing conversations, and there's that dynamic that you just can't recreate online. So those were some pros and cons that I noticed.
Yeah, I think I had the same kind of thing. Those who would come in, the few who did come in, we'd have a much better conversation about what they were working on than online. I think our area has one enormous advantage in that most of the students have a computer and they don't have to be in a painting studio or a print studio or a bookmaking studio. They can do the work where they are, and our lab is remote desktop. So if the computer they have is not powerful enough, they can connect into a lab computer in the room itself and actually do the work sort of remotely. So they don't have to, they don't have to be in the space itself, which is advantageous and disadvantageous in other ways.
Turner, does that pretty much reflect your experience or what Shiloh and Sean have shared?
Yeah, that does. Last summer, I discovered that I was going to need to develop 2 fully online courses for my illustration and my storyboarding classes. So I spent the whole summer making goofy videos in my kitchen. And luckily, the special effects department at the people that we work with made those videos sort of entertaining, and I was also able to include some PowerPoints, and I felt like those things were good resources for students to kind of fall back on and to review and to look at and stuff. But certainly, it's not a substitution for being together in a space. So. And I agree that a lot of my students were, using the computers and stuff. So it was a little bit, it may not be, this wouldn't be quite the same thing as trying to teach figure drawing or printmaking remotely. So I think it's sort of what Sean and Shiloh are saying sounds very familiar to me.
So Turner, when you say this special effects department, was that the HIDA online group?
Yeah. So
yeah. Okay.
So it was just like we just scrambled. We put together 2 15-week courses, and they, I try to make them interesting and informative, but also they included some cool special effects and some fun music and some other things so that people just don't, start drooling and fall asleep, halfway through. So that was cool to work with those guys. But again, and it's a good resource. I'm glad to have those tools, and I'm glad to have had that experience. And those things are out there for students to access, but it's not the same as interacting. And I also discovered that the students that did show up in person were the students who did the best work. That's how
who did show up? Did you say? Yeah.
They cared. Anyway.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, other comments from this group. Again, for those who came in just a little late, I'm trying to compile a list of comments, pro and con, because I think there are positive issues about hybrid that have been identified. But we have this number of issues that I think are part curricular, but another is about really faculty input and so on. Yeah, Ellen.
I don't know whether this has been covered or not, Dan, but I think I don't think the hybrid courses work very well for our students, but I think there should be an option for some kind of learners, and also circumstances that many of our students are in. It benefits them to have that option. I don't know if anybody has mentioned the community college system. What I'm hearing from my colleagues who teach there is their students really want to go back in person. They are interested in in-person classes. And I think that is going to be another consideration, because that's a big feeder into our upper division classes, students coming from what still is pretty much the biggest community college system in the country. So kind of aligning with, you know, where they're projecting their classes to go, I think could be very helpful. Secondly, I have heard for so many years that when you increase your enrollment, we'll give you more space. I haven't seen the space yet. And Dan's laughing because he's heard that too.
Yeah.
And also with a 7-year review coming up, I have heard the same kinds of comments from our outside reviewers coming in multiple reviews of our programs. Along with, I would think, accolades going to us at what quality work we're doing and our students are producing with what amounts to scant resources. And that's a polite way of saying it. I don't think that has really changed. We're continuing to lose space and not gain space. And I do not have a solution to that. We're kind of locked in many, many respects. But again, I think making the upper administration, you know, totally aware of, you know, we've heard this before, and certainly this is impacting the quality of our program, first of all. And also, I think the students who are interested in our program to begin with, of having that in-person option. I'm hearing consistently from my students, they are just wanting to get back in the studio. And there are really good things about working digitally and working remotely. But again, when you're teaching those beginning level courses and you're in person, you can have that conversation, you can catch those mistakes, and I can't see them online. I can't see the correction in color. I can't see the differences in some of the nuances. And so I'm very much in favor of really having a larger conversation about this and not jumping into something without really more background information and really a push for more space in order to accommodate us.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had a question for anybody. Are there any, like, what is the strategy for the school this fall in terms of COVID? I just haven't seen, I know I've saw somebody come around and remove all the posters from the building, you know, cautioning people to be careful, you know, all that stuff's gone. And I just was curious if that would have an impact on what we're talking about in terms of masking up again, or, I mean, that's part of it's a big reason why my classes were curtailed, was because students didn't want to come in because they were, you know, because of the pandemic and stuff. So I just haven't heard anything from, if there's any like change from above, or if anyone has any answers.
Yeah, Forrest addressed that in the email she sent out this morning.
Okay.
CDC and the Surgeon General of Arizona have changed to, I don't know if it's strongly recommending or requiring people to be wearing masks in indoor spaces again. And last week I had emailed Forrest about this because I was very concerned with the new Delta variant and this kind, you know, like, you know, it seemed to be really blowing up around the country. And she responded that what came from the dean's office was that we could not require students to wear a mask. We could not require students to get vaccinated, and we cannot ask a student about their vaccination status. So we're being put in a really precarious situation. But then that shifted over the weekend when the CDC and the Surgeon General came out. So I'm actually meeting with Forrest and the area coordinators right after this. And it's one of the questions that I have for Forrest. What updates have been put out? She did try to address it a little bit in that email that she sent out this morning, but I don't think it addresses it in its totality. I think there's still questions that I have about it. So
Yeah.
I think it continues to be an evolving situation.
I mean,
Thank you.
a couple things that are really troubling to me is that there was this total contradiction between university policy in June and Governor Doug Ducey's proclamation, right? Which is just ridiculous. I mean, it basically reflects everything that Mary just said about, oh, we can't require them to mask and all this other BS. It is super critical for those of us in the trenches that upper administration and state politics and that power structure come in sync on some level, because we are really caught in the middle of contradictory information, you know? And then I would also say that the hybrid thing is not a solution for COVID, because we actually have full, in many cases, except maybe with Sean's classes where they're doing 15 and 15, that's still a lot. The hybrid classes mean everybody shows up on a single day. So it's not a COVID responsible solution.
No.
Yeah, quick thing. Didn't this is Steve, if you mind jumping in for a second. There are two things. One is, didn't Tempe come up with a rule of wearing masks indoors? And so we do look at it in terms of where the different cities have different rules as well. The other thing is, I'm one of the sort of one of the oddballs in that I actually taught classes in person only. So in spring of 2020, I, of course, had to break over to Canvas, the telephone, and Dropbox to get through the classes. But last year, I taught all of my classes in person. And so that was, and I found that people were interested in being there, but also teaching photography was important for me to get people not only to come to class, but it also got them out to at least look around and do photographs. We could also talk about the different ways of how they could do things safely as well, too. So that I'm somebody who is not interested in a online only or a hybrid. I'm somebody who would much rather teach in person only and find that there's some real value to that.
All right.
I did want to say that the provost sent out an update, or Mark Olson sent out an update about masks last week as well. And that's probably in your email queue if you didn't see that. There's a question, there's a point that Ellen made that I wanted to follow up on. And that is this idea of faculty input and who is making the decisions. And in some of the responses to your initial email, Dan, it was inferred that the decisions were being made by the dean and not necessarily by the director. And I'm kind of curious about that and how that can be discovered or found out and how much truth is in that. Because if the director's hands are tied and it's a HIDA level decisions that are being made, then that is a totally different situation, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we need to, I think in this meeting at 11, we need to raise this question.
Yeah. We can ask Forrest about.
I mean, again, it's
muted,
been
Gregory.
great. She's scrambling. She's doing everything she can. And I'm sure she's certainly caught between faculty pressure and the dean. I mean, that's maybe the role of the director, but I think we need to be able to mount a response with one voice that's really strong enough in saying that, hey, wait a minute, we need to have input into this process, which is a major curricular decision, whether it's the director or the dean making that final call.
It's no criticism of Forrest. I know she's kind of taken, she stepped into a situation that was kind of messy. And, but I do think she's the type of person that you can ask her directly questions like that.
Yeah, no, I love working with Forrest.
Yeah, she's pretty straightforward. Gregory, you were talking, but you were muted.
I was just wondering if you imagine, Dan, that we would just check in with Forrest to make certain whatever we submitted forward as far as the consensus of opinions and input, that also went to the dean, because I've found that the dean is a pretty sensitive listener, and that but just go ahead and check in with Forrest and say, hey, Forrest, we're going to also direct this to the dean or whatever, once, just so that Forrest, we're not going over Forrest's head necessarily, but I just do want to say that I find the dean pretty responsive, and but it is sometimes they're also moving fast and they also have too many things on their plates. But we just have to step in, but to do it somehow as appropriate protocols.
No, absolutely. I hear you.
Could you hear that?
We heard you. What I was
Yeah.
going to say is just, and this is kind of like the email response I gave you, Dan, last week or whatever. And starting with the list Dan's making right now, I tend to find that a list of like, here's what's working and what's not, with a set of proposals of what we need, tends to garner more response than simply this isn't working. So if it is things like we don't have a community space, we don't have an open lab because they're all taken up they're occupied every minute of every day. We don't have these proposals for how we might have them, or like this set of needs can go further, I think, than our concerns alone.
One of the questions that I thought about, Dan, this morning when I was reading through Forrest's email was that the fashion has relocated downtown to their new building, which leaves Tempe Center open. And I've been hearing for the last 15, well, actually now 18 years, that Tempe Center is supposed to be demolished. Well, it's still standing. So they're saying that it's supposed to, demolition is supposed to happen in December, but I'm not sure about that. But that's what's happening to that space.
Yeah.
And
I've
can that
been-
space be accessed?
Yeah, I've been privy to some of the conversations with Jake Pinholster and, Joanna when she was at the helm and so on. And it really does seem like they're serious this time around, because I thought we were just going to strip away the west end of the whole Tempe Center complex, but it seems like the whole thing is going now, starting in December. And this is, who's impacted the worst is Dan Mayer, who just spent, like a good deal of last summer moving the entire Pyracantha press with tons and tons and tons of, lead type over into that new space in the east end of Tempe Center. Okay, we've got our whole office. We've got 2 of our classes, a fully redesigned, upgraded 3D space. All of that has happened in the past year. And now we're being asked to move again, but we don't know where. So it's hard to do good work in the face of these different pressures, for sure.
And it's also a colossal waste of money.
No kidding.
Especially, I mean, if we're so cash strapped, we're just like wasting money with not having a cohesive strategy.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what.
I don't have any space either.
Okay, Gregory, sorry, what?
I said I'm also losing my space, and I don't have a new space to replace.
Oh, of
the
course,
community
195 is going away. Yeah.
And so and we've been looking for new spaces, but they have nothing for us yet. So.
Well, I guess what would be a good, maybe 24 hours, 48 hours to wait for final responses from faculty for just compiling this list. And again, I really take your comments to heart, Kayla, about not just giving a shit list, but really saying, well, this is working, this isn't working, and we want to work together in finding an appropriate solution that maintains the high quality work that we expect of our faculty and our students. And so we can wordsmith that, but what do you think? A couple days wait for comments to filter in, and then at least by the end of the week, I'll have something together that I can forward first to Forrest and then maybe CC'd to the dean, or directly to the dean and CC'd to Forrest. I'll keep you all apprised of what's going on. I really appreciate you coming out, in the middle of the summer. Well, maybe it's the end of the summer. We're really beginning to think about how we're going to manage. I had a meeting early with one of our graduate students, Zoe June, and she's teaching 2D for us, and her husband is a nurse, and they're very concerned about coming back into the classroom in person. And she says, I have no idea when my husband's going to contact a COVID patient, and so I'm not sure that I can really guarantee that I'm in person in class. And so I think our fallback situation, case by case by case, is going to be, well, those circumstances are going to mean that you need to meet your students via Zoom and not come in person, and then the rest of the class is going to be delivered asynchronously. So in that case, what that means is that we're making our own rules for that particular circumstance to meet the challenges and demands, and that we are more or less taking responsibility for the health and well-being of our students. Because I see that as our first responsibility, irrespective of what Doug Ducey or Michael Crow or, Stephen Tepper or Forrest Solis says. I don't know, what are they going to do? Well, hey, you didn't follow policy. You were supposed to cram, 22 people into this small classroom. Dan, why didn't you? Well, because I didn't feel it was responsible. That's my response. So I think there may be a little bit of unilateral action that may be important to take. And obviously all of us are watching the circumstance day by day, and we're not going to do anything that threatens the health and well-being of our students. Any last minute comments?
Or ourselves.
Or ourselves, yeah, for sure.
We're useless if we get sick and are unable to teach.
Yeah.
So we have to look out for everyone's health. It's, yeah.
And this is what I'm scared about in terms of because what we're trying to have right now are really big picture conversations that have been needed, certainly since I've been here, it sounds like for decades. And we're again going to be, and it felt like this was going to be this moment that we were going to be returning and had, like, could be look big picture, changes that were made, what didn't work now that we're returning in person. And we're going to be back in this precarious position where it's going to be necessity and emergency thinking as opposed to big picture structural thinking. So I'm nervous about that. I mean, like I said, I have a 10-year-old home who can't get vaccinated. We had to give her a COVID test this weekend because she has a cold. And I was like, oh my God, like if she gets sick, I ethically can't go. And then that kind of thinking didn't even occur to me because I'm vaccinated, so like there are going to be so many moving parts again. And so I find it's so sad, I think, because I feel like we're on this moment where a lot of us are like, okay, we saw that. Now we're kind of thinking with what works. Let's think big picture again. And I'm afraid that we're going to be stuck in the, mired in the day-to-day necessities. So.
Well, and the real kicker, I think, there is that we're doing this program review in that state of emergency. So like that's a really weird headspace to try to navigate, and so it's going to be challenging. Dan, I'm going to check out because we have another meeting in a few minutes.
Right.
Good to see everybody.
Good to see you all. Thank you for taking time and providing your opinions. I'll be in touch. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan.
Muriel, did you have something, Muriel? Muriel, did you have something?
Muted.
We can't hear you.
You're muted, Muriel.
I think that the in-person is more viable for learning the particular video skills that I teach because there's access to the lab, our green screen, and so forth. However, international students and students that live in Flagstaff and so forth are now forced to come to campus, and we're going to lose some of them, particularly our international students. I have several from China who will not be returning because of this situation, the in-person situation.
Excellent points. Yeah. Okay, gang. Thanks a lot.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.